Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning show, broadcasting live on Channel 9 and also live streaming on Port Media's YouTube channel. And if you'd rather watch on YouTube, it's easy to find. Just go to www.ncmhubhub.org and click on the YouTube icon, and it comes up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm really delighted to welcome today's guest who will be talking on our theme for the day, Getting Through Hard Times. My first guest is psychologist and artist, Nancy Cahan, who will be talking about ways we can each use our pandemic experience to create positive changes in our lives. And in the second half of the show, I'm going to be welcoming two of our very own Newburyport High School coaches, football coach Ben Smolski and volleyball coach Lori Solazzo, who will help us galvanize our spirits and stay focused on and strong for the long game. But first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Nancy Cahan. Nancy, welcome, and thank you so much for visiting the morning show.
Thank you for having me.
Nancy, could we start? Would you be willing to just say a few things about the work you do and who you do it with?
Okay, so I have a private practice that I've had for about 30 years. I worked in Andover for about 24 years, and I moved to Newburyport maybe 8 years ago, and then moved my practice here as well, maybe 4 years ago. And I work with individual adults and couples, broad range of issues. And I've been working in my private practice for many, many years, much more than any experience with this pandemic. So
yeah, well, yeah, true for all of us.
yeah.
So, well, Nancy, I'm so excited to have you on this show. A few weeks ago, it was just a few weeks ago, but of course it feels like an eternity since this pandemic began. It's hard to remember sometimes. It was mid-March when we got our first stay-at-home order.
Right.
But you wrote a very wise and helpful column for the Daily News. And I am eager to have you share your perspectives on the morning show. You talked about the extraordinarily altered lifestyles that we're all living these days and the emotional challenges that those altered lifestyles bring. So first, I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about the alterations that you've observed and the distinct emotional challenges that they're bringing all of us.
Okay, so just to start with, I took a walk down by Cashman Park by the river, and a woman, we with our masks on, we had this muffled good morning. So that's our new reality. But it was very friendly. And I think we're feeling more of a need for connection and more of a gratitude when that happens, even though it's strange. I mean, we're in almost like a dystopian time. It's so extraordinarily different. Our structure has totally changed for most people. Yeah. And we wear masks. We don't know if we will get sick. We don't know if we'll get somebody else sick. We don't know if someone will die. And this is really, really hard to wrap around. Our lives are marked by uncertainty. And so whether we tend towards optimism or pessimism or some mixture, or whether our default position is to be angry or sad, frustrated, anxious with this pandemic, for many people, these attributes, these characteristics might increase and probably have increased. So people who live alone often feel more isolated. Yeah. People who are coupled or in families sometimes feel like they can't get away.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit like Sartre's No Exit, the existential play for some people, if that's how you pronounce it. We have less choices about where we can go. What we can do, which works for some people. I mean, there are actually some people I found a few people who like being hunkered down and not having to go out, and it's actually given them permission. But for the majority of people, it's really been a difficult challenge. A lot of cabin fever and frustration. But also an alteration that I've seen is that there's an incredible amount of generosity and love that people have shown each other. A lot of reaching out, supporting people with food insecurity, supporting our local businesses. Like Jabberwocky, there was a GoFundMe because everyone was, we need to keep them afloat. And restaurants, people are taking out more often because they want to keep, their restaurants afloat. Right. Creating celebrations for the graduating seniors, Zooming with family and friends, creating a lot more connection.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I want, go ahead.
Oh, it's just a whole range of responses, the good, bad, the ugly, and the transformative, one might say. And one of the things I thought would be interesting to ask you about, partly what you're saying is people tend to respond only more so to speak.
Right.
And I wonder, how can we tell if our emotional responses are within range, so to speak, or when we're in a zone where we need to actively tend to those emotions?
Okay. So, so before talking about the emotional responses that might be less healthy, I wanted to normalize some of the unusual behaviors that some people are having. So some people may find that they just need to cry. I mean, I think some people are more focused on how this is affecting their lives personally, but I've noticed that there's some people who are really taking it in how many deaths there are in the United States worldwide. You see the listing in New York City of just 1%, and it's very, very striking. So there have been a number of people that, unusual for them, may just, the feelings well up and they need a release and they cry. They might go to their cars to cry. They might decide, they might watch Netflix, but we're all watching more of that probably, and finding that they're crying more readily. So there's a buildup of emotion. Some people are taking aimless drives. I've heard of a few people who kind of go into the bathroom to eat a cookie, get away from everybody, a little bit unusual. Talking to oneself, I'm actually doing that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Being friendlier to strangers or more withdrawn, feeling more sad, anxious, or irritable. It's all understandable given what we're all going through. Someone told me recently how her aging father, who'd never done this before, showed up on her lawn, waved hello from a distance, and just wanted to mow the lawn for the structure, to give him something to do, and it made him feel good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I think we need to give ourselves compassion and understanding as we navigate this challenge, because I've observed that we're often very critical of ourselves, of how we feel. We often pass judgment on ourselves and we think, oh, we shouldn't be feeling this. We shouldn't be crying in a car or eating a cookie in a bathtub by ourselves, but it's really okay. We're complex creatures with a lot of conflicting emotions, and this is an extraordinarily difficult time. But that being said, there are emotional responses that may be out of range, as you've mentioned. Excessive worry, that really you can't get away from it. Sleeplessness, major changes in eating, substance use and abuse, increased irritability that doesn't go away, symptoms that indicate a need to find balance within ourselves, ask for help from those around us, or seek therapy. But I wanted to share something, and I want to get this in.
Okay.
Even though I know you have another question for me, because
that's all right. Go for it.
This was I'm going to read this. A really lovely neighbor of mine had read my article and said to me, "Oh, that was really helpful." And I felt like in the article it was obvious what I had written, but that's because this is my work and this is how I think. And I said, "Oh, well, so I'd like to know what helped you." So I actually was just asking him to tell me, but he misunderstood and he actually wrote something. And I liked it so much, I asked him permission if I could read it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Because it really captures something that I think is important. So he wrote, acknowledge in these unprecedented times, I have responsibilities. That includes not only sanitizing, masks, and social distancing, but also reaching out to friends, family, and neighbors, realizing that I am not alone in experiencing different and unusual feelings, and not to be surprised if and when they show up. I must be proactive in maintaining my emotional and physical health, to be on guard against different forms of anxiety seeping into my life. If I feel lonely, I should reach out to friends and family. Watch what I eat and drink, such as eating healthy, taking supplements, and juicing because my daughter said I should. And that's kind of cute because he's a self-described meat and potatoes guy, and his daughter is trying to
Yeah.
get him to juice. All right. So recognizing that this pandemic is a marathon and I should pace
Yes.
myself, practice patience, and treat myself gently. And I just thought that was so lovely.
It is totally lovely, and I love the idea of pacing yourself, and the metaphor of the marathon seems
Right.
absolutely appropriate and on
Right.
point. You use the word balance in there, and I know that's one of the things that you talked about in the article that I thought was so key. You talked about how important it is to cultivate and sustain balance, and I was hoping that you could clarify for us what you
Okay.
mean in this context by balance, and why you
Okay.
think it's so critical right now.
Okay. So, well, part of why it's so critical is that our structure has changed dramatically, and that throws everybody off. It takes a lot to create the structure that works for you. So, so maintaining a structure or creating a new structure is really important um, for balance and a healthy lifestyle. So, exercise is essential if you can do it. If you're healthy enough to exercise, because it keeps us balanced emotionally and physically, and it really does have an impact on anxiety and depression. I mean, there's research that supports that. So exercise is essential. Getting time to oneself on a regular basis is really essential if you're cooped up with everybody, and really making sure that you social distance walk with people if you're comfortable doing that. Some of my friends actually won't even do that yet. And other people do that very readily, or doing a lot of Zoom, but staying connected is very important. And then having a lot of outlets, such as I've heard that some people are taking up baking bread, but many outlets are wonderful, such as dancing. There are Zoom dance fests that one can join, singing. Music is very healing, so singing and playing an instrument or just singing along, reading more, feeling useful, giving to others really helps us to feel good. Humor and laughter is really an essential outlet. I wrote the article before the stores and the restaurants had shut down. There was a lot of information about the virus and how it passes and what to do. But no, it didn't seem like anybody was writing about the emotional impact. So the reality is I woke up one morning and decided, oh, I have to write this. And I'd never done that before. And it helped me to write the article. It helped me to feel helpful because I was feeling just the anxiety of everything. And then I dusted off my sewing machine and began to make masks. It's not like I've sewn in a long time. And I made masks for family, friends, and neighbors. And that added some structure while I was getting my footing. But also, I felt good being able to give.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps people when they can give and feel useful. It helps them with a balance. It's not just a personal, how can I feel balanced in other ways? But most people need to find what works for them. I mean, everyone's different. But there's another kind of balance that I wanted to address and had mentioned in the article. And it's less about what we do externally, but more about our internal state. And I had mentioned the Buddhist teaching about the 2 arrows, which addresses suffering, discomfort, discontent, how we bring our best selves to a situation. So the first arrow impacts us. The first arrow that impacts us is where we have no control over a situation, which is this pandemic. That's a big arrow.
Yeah.
The second arrow is how we respond, what our attitude is. Do we increase our suffering or lessen it? So I wanted to just give a personal example to show what this can look like. So I'm on the rail trail, and half the people are wearing masks and half are not. And this was a number of weeks ago. It's gotten a little bit better, but still there are a number of people that don't wear masks. So I'm going along, and the first arrow is the reality that we can't be safe together, the reality that we really need to be wearing masks. We can cause each other sickness. That is the first arrow. The second arrow is that I am walking along feeling irritable. I am throwing my little arrows at everybody who's not wearing a mask. Of course, the arrow is not hitting them. It's hitting me. because I'm passing judgment. I'm feeling irritable. I'm swerving around. But what's happening, my second arrow, is that I ended up not enjoying my walk.
Yeah.
You know, I have no control over the pandemic, but my attitude was getting in the way. That I caused my own discomfort and suffering in that way. So it was a decision that if I'm going to walk on the rail trail or any place that's more crowded, I have to accept that some people aren't going to be wearing masks. I need to be okay with walking around them. And I'm still working on not passing too much judgment, but I am getting much better.
Right.
So Viktor Frankl is a neurologist and he died, a neurologist and a psychiatrist who wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. He had survived the concentration camp during the Holocaust, and he witnessed how people cope when they were stripped of everything, which is something, you know, we are being stripped of a lot. And there are two quotes that I really wanted to share with you. One is that, and I'm reading it, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves.
Yes.
And that is true. And then the second quote, I think many people have probably heard it, showed up on one of my yoga teachers' websites. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In this space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So we need to give ourselves space to pay attention to our choices. And I know I'm going on. I know that it should be more of an interaction, but I wanted to actually add one more thing. I had this about balance. I had a lot that I had thought about. So humor me. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who teaches that we have many seeds within us. We have the seeds within us of, you know, anger and fear, compassion, love, everything. And that we need to be aware of what seeds we water, because whatever we water, that is what grows. That's where we put our energy. That's what's going to increase. So I wanted to speak in terms of balance about the seeds of gratitude, because even though this is incredibly hard, I'm not making light of it. Gratitude, really, we have these seeds of gratitude within us, and it can have a positive impact on us if we water those seeds. There are several research studies that actually support this. It's not just this idea that somebody came up with, because everyone has been talking about gratitude. And there was a research study, and it actually showed that over a 3-month period, if someone wrote down 5 things they were grateful for every day, that actually the goodwill feeling lasted for a long time. So feeling gratitude is important, but in addition, and with that, it's also expressing gratitude to others is really important. It helps them to feel good, but it helps us to feel good. So that's a long-winded, balanced response.
No, but those are all really, really important and very helpful ideas to focus on and to remember, including the arrow that you have control over, seeds you want to water. And I think gratitude is really key. And you're right, I studied positive psychology for a while, and there is there's a whole research into the positive impacts of gratitude. And actually, one of the highest measurable impacts in increasing well-being and sustaining that well-being is what Martin Seligman calls the gratitude letter, where you think of somebody that you haven't sufficiently thanked. And you write that person a letter, laying it all out there, tell them what you're grateful for, and then you share that letter with them. Now, in different times, you would go visit that person and read it in their presence, which has a high positive impact, of course, on the person who wrote the letter as well as the person receiving it. These days, you Zoom, of course, but still, I think gratitude is key. And
that's a lovely idea. That's great.
And that was one of the highest positive impacts for sustained well-being. Well, Nancy, your comments on balance were just lovely and wonderful. And I'm struck by the story you tell about the rail trail, because we've all learned to do what I call the coronavirus shuffle. And that's the little loop you move. The radius.
It's a lot of looping.
Find your way around some people. But one of the things you talked about in the article, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, because I thought it was really helpful, is you talk about how some of us at different times may find ourselves in denial, and some of the non-mask wearers may well be in a kind of a state of denial about the importance of masks, or how it's not just a civil liberties issue. You're protecting me and I'm protecting you when I wear that mask. And one of the things you talked about was that it's important and helpful for all to understand the deeper layers of what might be driving our denial, whether it's about masks or social distancing or something else, and how can it help us to do that if we find ourselves in denial? How can it help us to understand its deeper sources in ourselves as individuals?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think part of what needs to happen is, if someone's in denial, it means they don't know they're in denial. So it's kind of hard to know what to do about that.
Yeah,
but they don't usually know. Huh?
There may be reminded. I've seen the looks people get.
Right. They might. So I would say that it's really important this is the dive deeper part of this.
Yes.
Someone needs to take time and space to look at what are their underlying motivations for why they, let's say, don't wear a mask. And so, for example, when I'm walking along, if I'm far distance from someone, I slip it down because it's really not that comfortable. I don't breathe as well, but I keep it on, so otherwise. So I think that, denial is a defense mechanism to avoid feeling something uncomfortable. So I mentioned it in the article because I was struck by how many people were continuing to hang out at bars and sitting close together in restaurants before they closed, but still, like particularly at bars, sitting really close together. This isn't 6 feet, this is, 2 feet. And they were not social distancing. And it seemed clear at that point, even though bars and restaurants hadn't closed, that the virus was spreading and it really wasn't safe. It was pretty clear in the news. So for some people, it can be their discomfort at having to change a habit. People don't like to change habits, and so they think, well, it's not that bad. It's okay. Or let's say that's their go-to for socializing. They don't want to feel alone. They don't want to feel perhaps lonely. So they find it's like confirmation bias. They're supporting their theory that you don't need a mask because they want to be able to go out and sit with people and they don't want to feel alone. So that's, some of how people have denial, but then there's another kind of denial that can be helpful, and it's a functional denial. So where the person isn't really unaware, but they're needing it for a while. So we know that this is going to go, our change in lifestyle is going to go on for a long time, but for some people it's unbearable to think it could really go on for a year or something just interminable. So they might tell themselves, it's like a functional denial. Oh, well, a couple of months. And they deep down know, if you pay attention, it probably will be longer, but it helps them to titrate the difficulty. And that can be a healthy form of denial. The problem with denial with the masks is that can kill people.
Yes.
I hate to sound so dramatic, but that's a denial people need to look at, I think. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, right. Thank you, Nancy. That's really interesting and helpful. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was many people have talked about there being silver linings to this pandemic.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We've been talking about the challenges, and there are legion, but you do talk about in your article about the way crises, almost by their very disruptive nature, can sometimes nudge us into needed, perhaps even overdue change. So I wonder if you could give us some examples of some of the way those silver linings might work.
Okay. One thing I wanted to say is I think the pandemic has created a little bit of a sink, swim, or tread water. So I'm not going to talk about the sinking. And I think that treading, because people need help if they're sinking. which is obvious. But treading water is okay, given that treading water means you're doing pretty well sometimes. You know, keeping a structure, maybe not trying anything new, just keeping your head above water, doing okay. And then there are people who are swimming. They're jolted out of the daily routine with the possibility of something positive. It's not taking anything for granted, finding new possibilities. So some people are reprioritizing how much time they spend with other people or themselves, and they're realizing they want to change that when the virus has ended. People are spending more time with families and finding that some people it's been hard and can bring up a lot of issues, but some people they've actually gotten closer. Some people have discovered that working from home, not having a commute, even if they miss some aspects, they're rethinking how they want to have things be different. People are discovering the art of bread making, being more creative cooks, because many people have had to do that when you can't get certain things.
Find power.
A lot of tending to gardens. I started my garden. I was desperate and researched zone 6. What can you do? You know, much earlier, and I started a garden much earlier because I needed to do that. Some people are working on a lot of home projects, finishing an online degree, and I'm talking about an adult who might be going back to something they hadn't done. But really waking up to different priorities in their lives and looking at what's important, not taking each other for granted, being much more grateful for our connection than maybe we have been before, and appreciating the simple pleasures. And so there's a burst of creativity that's happening at many different levels. And it's brought out our humor, which is really important, and our love and our compassion. We smile at strangers with the masks, maybe smiling a little bit more, little crinkles at the end, because that's how you know someone's smiling. People are donating to causes, they're supporting businesses, you know, a lot of goodwill. Silver linings.
All those silver linings are extraordinary and wonderful. For me, I've just been enjoying being outside in nature a lot more, and I go for a walk every day. I don't just intend to go, I actually do go.
Yeah, that's great.
My senior Labrador, who's 14 and a half, and she never has to be alone, which is a good thing because she's of an age where you just cherish every day. So there are a lot of things. It reminds me of what you were saying about watering the seeds of gratitude. When we water the seeds of gratitude, we tend to find those silver linings. And once we start looking for them, there are a lot of them, especially here in Newburyport. Nancy, you've just given us extraordinary amounts of wisdom and lots of food for thought and ways to utilize our own pandemic experience to attain a kind of a wisdom and to find what joy is possible within it. So thank you for that. I think that you had another wise person is Leonard Cohen. And I know that you had something that you wanted to share, and I would never turn down the opportunity to hear something wise from Leonard Cohen. So could you share that with us?
Yeah, this is a lyric from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem, and I had it on my refrigerator when my kids were growing up, frayed edges, tea stained for years, and it's just one of my sayings. So he sings, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Wonderful, beautiful. That's how the light gets in. Nancy, I can't thank you enough. It's just been wonderful to have you on the morning show. I hope you keep writing. You mentioned before that this wasn't something you ordinarily did, but I think it's pretty clear your column was very impactful. And it might suggest another silver lining.
Thank you. And I appreciate
experience is to have discovered a knack, a talent for sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for making this so comfortable, Mary. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay.
And I am now looking forward to welcoming my next guest. So Tyler, let's see if we can get Lori and Ben on the screen and welcome them. So let's see. Here we go. Technical difficulties with Zoom. But Lori, you're here, so let's go ahead and get started while Ben is finding his way in. You know, I was hoping, Lori, could we start? I know you're a math teacher at Newburyport High School, and I wonder if we could start by having you tell us just a little bit about how long you've been at Newburyport High School and what led you to want to be a coach as well as a math teacher.
So this is my 18th year, I believe now, at Newburyport. This was my first official teaching job out of college. I played sports in high school. I played volleyball in college. And so I knew I always kind of wanted to coach just because it was an important part of my life. And I've had some good coaches along the way. As for teaching, I feel like my parents indoctrinated us all to become teachers. My sisters and I, we had a little classroom in our basement, and we always all three loved it. And I loved math, so I just think it kind of pushed me in that direction. But yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Were your parents teachers?
No, I think my mom would have been a phenomenal teacher. She was a nurse for 30 years. They're both pretty much retired now. My dad had the family business, which was moving and petroleum hauling, but yeah.
Wonderful. Well, so math teacher and volleyball coach, Lori Solazzo, let me tell you why it was that I wanted to invite you and Ben Smolski, whom we hope still will be joining us momentarily. I read an article in the Washington Post that I was very intrigued by. It had a great title. It was called, "These Are Tough Times. The Best Coaches Know How to Get Through Them." And the author of this article, a journalist named Sally Jenkins, made the point that people today are craving leadership, voices of command and reassurance. And I think she's right about that. And she says coaches, of course, are the experts on this endeavor. We're all pretty pandemic weary, I think it's safe to say at this point. But the end of the pandemic is still very uncertain, both in when it will come and what our lives will look like, when or if that, well, it will come, but whenever it will arrive. So in this article, Sally Jenkins talked to 3 world-class coaches about times when right words or actions made a huge difference to a player or a team in building their confidence and their stamina. And you probably know these coaches. I will admit, I don't regularly follow sports, so I hadn't heard of them, but I bet you've heard of Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr, and former women's national soccer team coach Jill Ellis, and tennis coach, I may mispronounce this, Sylvain Bruno. And so I got the idea to invite some coaches from Newburyport to coach us and keep our morale high. So I reached out to Principal Wolf at the high school, and here you are. So I was hoping that we might start with you sharing a story from your coaching repertoire of words or actions that made a difference and turned around an attitude or brought out the best performance in a player or a team.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that I put myself in any, close at all to the category of these coaches that are in this article. Let's just say that first off.
Okay.
Very humbling. But anyway, so we've only been an official volleyball program at the high school for 3 years.
Yeah.
And so in our first year, we had girls that had never played volleyball before, and here we were, the Davids of the league, playing against these Goliath teams that have had established programs for years. So it's like, how do you deal with constantly boosting these girls' morale when they're coming out and getting hammered versus these really good teams? And so one day, I don't remember when it happened, but it was kind of earlier on in the season. I think it was in the huddle during a game or something. I had said to the girls, we need to make something out of nothing. And that's kind of been our team motto ever since, because we literally had nothing in the beginning. And, some players that we were playing against had been playing volleyball for years and years and years. And so we kind of just bring it back to that every time we're in a situation where, it's a tough situation, or maybe we are doing well, we continually try to make something out of nothing.
Right. And what impact did that have? And what do you think made that work for your players?
So I think it helped the girls maybe focus on the little things instead of worrying about the wins and the ultimate end result. We kind of did baby steps. And so it started with, well, let's just get the ball back over the net. And then it started with, well, don't let the ball hit the floor. And then it became, let's try to get good passes, and then let's set, and then let's hit, so it just, it kind of helped them compartmentalize, let's say, their thinking, and just focus on one thing at a time instead of that big picture, which gets them very fuzzy and it's just overwhelming for them.
Right. It strikes me that framing it that way then means everything you do is a success. Because when you're making something out of nothing, every time you take a step towards something, that's an accomplishment. That's you've met a goal. You're closer to where you want to be.
Right.
Now, is there a way that you think we could apply that strategy or that coaching to the situation that we're all in with the pandemic right now?
Yep. So the way that I like to think of it is we now have this opportunity to have this extra time in our lives. And I feel like we're go for, from the time we wake up till the time we go to bed, we're constantly going. And so we still have our jobs to do. We still have, responsibilities to take care of, but we can now take this, what feels like nothing at times, and make something of it, whether it's rebuild a relationship with somebody, or it's come up with a hobby, or focus on something that we haven't done in a long time because we have this time. That's kind of the way I like to think of it.
Absolutely, step by step. Yeah, brilliant. Well, Ben, welcome.
Yeah, sorry, technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties. It's Ben, it's the age of Zoom.
Yeah, definitely.
We're thrilled to have Zoom because it's enabled us to survive this pandemic, but it also comes with its challenges. But welcome to Ben Smolski, Newburyport High School's football coach. Happy to have you here, Ben. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I had just asked Lori, and I'll pose you the same question. If you could share with us a story of a time when there was a word or an action that you took as a coach that somehow turned things around for the performance of a team or a player. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you how we might apply that to our survival of the pandemic.
Thinking about that question, I think back to when I first started coaching when I was at Saugus High School, really trying to get the kids to buy into strength and conditioning. It's more of an action than a word. I would wake up at 4:30 and drive from here and drive up to Saugus High School, get there at 5:15, open up the weight room, and then I would actually work out with the kids. I was younger then too, so just by that action alone, getting those kids to buy in, talking to my friend now, but the kid that I coached during the time, AJ Guthrow, he's actually in the National Guard. I know that he probably got deployed when we had the state of emergency and stuff like that. I talked to him just this past year, and he's like, I always remember that, and I did the same exact thing when I was coaching football. So just kind of you're in it together, I guess, with your players. And that definitely applies to what's going on today with the current situation.
Yeah, that feeling of solidarity, in other words.
Yeah.
Showing up and presence together. Yeah. So there's a sense of, what's the phrase? Esprit de corps, I think. So, in the article that Sally Jenkins wrote, she has a great quotation from Mark Twain, where she quotes Twain as saying, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. I think that's a great quote. And I wonder, as a coach, how do you recognize the right word?
It really depends on the situation. It depends on what you go through as a team, or what an individual's going through in their own personal experience playing the sport. And you really got to read the cues from the kids and read the situation to determine what that word or what you are going to say and how you're going to present things to your student athletes.
Yeah. So
I agree with Ben, just reading the situation and knowing your players, knowing your audience, and knowing when the right time is to say certain things, but also us realizing and reflecting constantly as coaches that we don't always have the right words. And sometimes we might say things that aren't the best thing at the time. And that's just part of growing as a coach and growing as a team, is learning how to move forward from those types of situations.
And then just to go off of that, if you do ever make that mistake or you present something the wrong way, you take ownership of that and you move forward and you fix that and you acknowledge that too, as well with your student athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine the ability to do that, to be able to, it sounds like Ben intuitively know the right word to say. Reading the mood of the people, of the players, is a key part of it. But then being able to acknowledge when you might have veered a little bit off course, maybe there was a slight misreading. And that makes me think of another story that that this article talked about, where Sally Jenkins talks about Jill Ellis, who led the U.S. team to 2 World Cup titles. Pretty amazing accomplishment there. And she tells a story in this article. It wasn't about finding the right word. It was more about creating a different perspective. So there was a player named Rose Lavelle, a star player, and she was doubting herself because she had a poor start in the game. And so Ellis told her, why don't you go sit with the veterans and listen to their scars? And so she did. She went and sat with some very well-established players who talked about many of the mistakes they've made, the setbacks they've experienced, and nonetheless, they had found the tenacity to go forward with the game, to be pretty illustrious players. And so Jill Ellis said that this intervention worked to reestablish Roosevelt's confidence. She went out there and gave it her all. And I wonder if you think there's an equivalent coaching strategy to that intervention for helping us get through this pandemic.
I think that it's, once again, that message of we're in it together, and we're not little islands, and we're not on our own. And so I think as coaches, we try to help the girls build relationships and learn from each other. And so maybe it's how we run a practice, or maybe it's, a team building activity that we're doing that gets the girls to listen to each other and learn from each other and just build each other up.
I always tell my students and also athletes is you can never really reach success or be successful unless you experience failure and go through those hardships. It's learning about how to persevere and how to overcome, especially when things are going bad, because you can read a lot in the character of a student athlete or anyone when the going gets tough and things are getting tough, because that really says a lot about a person if they're able to overcome that. So definitely that applies.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a useful perspective to bear in mind. I find myself thinking along these lines of listening to the veterans or finding a different perspective. For some reason, I find myself thinking about World War II a lot. And I think about, this is tough. And things are really hard. The uncertainty is hard. But then I think about, both my parents were in the Army during World War II. And when people went off to that war, they didn't know how it was going to end. They really didn't know, that the Nazis were going to be defeated. There was rationing. There were all kinds of really difficult things. And somehow we call them the greatest generation because they persevered. And they saved the world. They saved democracy. So I find myself often thinking to past hard times. And as in Jill Ellis's story, just putting a perspective on it, that we have, I think, a capacity to persevere and to endure things that actually are much harder than some of the things we're currently. Now that's different if you've become ill or you've had people die. But waiting in line to get into Market Basket, I can deal with that. Wearing a mask, I can deal with that. And social distancing, I can deal with that. So have either of you found yourself going to past places or in our history at all?
My grandfather was a Marine on Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He just passed away about a year ago now. I think of all of my grandparents and the times that they went through, and they didn't have social media and they didn't have ways to stay connected like we do now. And that doesn't take away from the fact that it's hard for people right now. It absolutely is. But it's a good way to channel that strength, is to think about you know, what they went through, and they made it, and they were strong, and they were the greatest generation. There's no doubt about it.
That's right.
I think back to my grandmother. She lives in Salisbury now. She's in her late 80s, but she grew up basically at like when she was 15, she was in charge of her because her just had a tough upbringing. Father left, and mother wasn't really around much, and kind of grew up during the Great Depression where they barely had anything. And hearing her tell that story kind of keeps everything in perspective, and especially when you're basically in charge of your family as a teenager, you know.
Yeah, sometimes that perspective can just push us to find our own inner resilience and keep going forward. So thanks for those perspectives. You know, at the end of the article I've been talking about, because surely it made an impact on me, Sally Jenkins talks about the essence of effective leadership that she distilled from talking to these three coaches. And one of the essences she said she concluded was that these effective coaches would stress the solution over the problem. And I wondered if you both agree that that's key and how we might apply that to our pandemic readiness.
Ben,
Whoever would like to do.
Okay. So I agree with that. I do think that you need to recognize what the problem is and, you know, kind of deal with it and talk about it. But ultimately, you need to move on and you need to come up with how we're going to get through this. So, you know, as a team, there are a lot of different situations that arise that are problems, and you have to come up with solutions for it. And it's kind of the same way with this right now. You know, this is a problem. Right. It's a hard thing to be going through, but what are we going to do to get past it? And what are we going to do to move forward?
I'd say definitely. I mean, from obviously a coaching perspective, you know, you fix your problems that you have, or maybe the problems you have against your opponent we look at film, we critique our players, and we get better next week. And then we look at the film of the opponent and make a game plan, and hopefully they can execute that game plan to then go and be successful on Friday night. So it's definitely something that, I don't know, sports is simulation of life and how to deal with life's problems.
Yes.
I always tell my kids football is not life, but it's a simulation of life. And you know, how you react and respond on a football field is going to foreshadow how you react and respond in life. And you know, you have to make those plans, and them seeing the plans that we make, and then trying to enact those plans. I think that definitely is something that goes along with the current situation.
Right, excellent. So you can learn from the past, but you don't want to dwell on it over much. You want to stay focused on solving the problem that's in front of you, because that's how you'll create and get to the future. Yeah. So I like that.
Saturday morning, we look at the film from the night before. We type it. We stay up late and type in the comments, and we're done looking at that film. And we move on after that. So it's immediately look at the past and then move on and get better.
Excellent. Well, the other essence of effective leadership that this article talked about was, I love this phrase, an underlying generosity is how she puts it. She said that good leadership is a humbling endeavor in which you care more about fixing things than you do about getting credit for the fixing. And I wondered if both of you agreed with that. And if so, I was curious to find out, who are you seeing these qualities in these days, coaches or leaders that you've encountered or been inspired by yourselves?
Mm-hmm. We're both teachers at the high school, so I think that we're surrounded, you know, not literally, but all the teachers in the building, you know, we're looking to fix the problem and do what we can to move forward. And I don't think anybody's out there looking for credit for that. It's our job, and it's what we, you know, signed up to do essentially, and it's what we want to do. And I think that, you know, all of those people fall under that category.
Absolutely. And it hasn't been easy. I know. Absolutely. What about you, Ben?
You know, I would even add on to that, you know, with our administration and superintendent, I really feel like that's the approach that they're having. We're all in this together and we're trying to fix it. And that's always reassured to us in our faculty meetings. And, you know, that's something, I mean, just thinking back to my father, he was a youth coach and then he was a high school coach. And, you know, it wasn't about him. It wasn't about recognition. It was about just taking pride in the community and helping kids out, and that's what it's all about.
And that's a powerful form of leadership, absolutely. Well, I wanted to bring things to a somewhat more personal level for both of you, because I can only imagine the challenges of having to abruptly end your classroom teaching as well as your coaching in mid-March. It was so sudden. Everything just stopped. And so I wanted to find out from each of you, what has the impact been on you of having to be distant then from the students you've been teaching, as well as the athletes you've been coaching on your teams? And how have you coached yourselves through this? Whoever would like to begin.
Well, so we left, it was Thursday, March 12th. We were business as usual. Students were in the building. And then we got the notification that it was just going to be teachers the following day. And we still didn't know on that Friday the 13th, whether we were coming back or not. But lo and behold, March 16th, we did not come back into the building. And it was, we maybe thought, I felt it maybe it was just temporary at the time. I think we all kind of felt that way. And so, we hit the ground running and we got some enrichment work out for the kids. And it just kind of felt like we were on April vacation, but still providing some work for the students.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're kind of in this for the long haul. And so, personally, I have 2 little ones at home and Ben does too. So we're in a kind of similar situation. And so it's crazy because now you're teaching your kids at home and you're trying to teach, your students too. And you kind of buck up and you just do it. And there are some days you ride the roller coaster, some days are lows and some days are highs, but you keep pushing the course.
Yeah. I hear your coaching strategies in there, Lori. Self-coaching. How about you, Ben?
I'd say the toughest weekend, probably when the whole situation started, was that first weekend, March 14th and 15th. I was losing my mind in the sense of, I could see this going on for the rest of the year and all the uncertainty. And I'm a person of routine, but I guess, the one thing we always tell our kids, and, you got to coach yourself up sometime, is really focus on the things that you can control and just move on with that idea. And it's easier said than done sometimes. And, it's definitely something to live by, and it's something, something that you preach as a coach in your sport, and that's something that gets you through in life, is take care of the things you can control, and that will make your situation that much better. And then you learn a new routine, and I feel like after that weekend, things have slowly and surely gotten better. And all I can control is what I do for my job is what I'm doing on Google Classroom and providing feedback and being in touch with the students. For our athletes with the training, we meet once a week and do like a push-up challenge or a plank challenge. So on Google Hangout is a big part of conditioning and strength conditioning, and then just focusing on family and I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, so my wife's still working because she's an OT, so she doesn't work as many hours. She's home today, but so, on those Tuesdays when I'm meeting my students, that, they're going to come in while I'm teaching a class. It is what it is. It'll be a quick guess, and I'll put them back to what they were doing. But, just kind of embrace the situation and enjoy the family time as well, which has been good. I mean, Dad's home every day right now, so that's their new routine. So,
yeah.
But you sounded like true coaches, I must say. And I'm appreciative of your wisdom and your good spirits. And so I want to ask you a final question. Do you have any final words of wisdom for Team Newburyport to keep us focused on the long game, so to speak?
I'm just going to say, make something out of nothing. Treat this time as hard times, but try to find some good in it and try to find something that you can work towards, whether it's bettering yourself at something or whatever, but try to turn it into a good situation.
Absolutely. How about you, Ben?
I'll go with focus on what you can control, like I said already, and to quote our alma mater, onward, forward.
That's right.
Okay. Onward, forward. I like that.
Just keep moving
Thank you both
forward,
so
day by
much.
day.
I so appreciate your taking the time to visit the morning show and to share your coaching stories and your coaching wisdom and helping us get through hard times. I really appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Pardon, Ben?
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Bye, Ben. Bye, Lori. Thanks again.
Bye.
So
Thanks.
appreciate it. Well, and thank you for watching, everybody. I'm so glad to have you with us. I hope you'll join us next Thursday on the morning show when our topic will be mourning, or more accurately, the failure to mourn adequately and publicly the massive and ever-growing number of Americans who have died from COVID-19, who often, sadly, sometimes seem reduced to statistics. My guest next week will be Professor of History and Pulitzer Prize nominee for her book, The Politics of Mourning, Death and Honor at Arlington National Cemetery, UConn professor and Cambridge resident, Nikki Magalia. She's going to talk to us about how national mourning after a disaster or a war unites us. By grieving together, she says, history catches its breath. And out of many, we become one. So when that doesn't happen, what happens to us? We become lost and fragmented. You won't want to miss Nikki Magalia. And you won't want to miss my second guest next week either, Buddhist teacher Matthew Daniel of the Insight Meditation Center of Newburyport, who's going to bring his clarity and his characteristic gentle wisdom to bear on the importance of learning to embrace uncertainty, which of course is the essence of the pandemic that's passing through our planet right now. And in that embrace of uncertainty, we may just find an inner calm that will enable us to tap a depth of resourcefulness we may not have known that we had. So if you missed part of today's show, don't despair. You can find it on Port Media's YouTube channel. Just go to www.ncmhub.org and click on the playlist for the morning show. Each show will also air on WJOP. Today's show will be on FM 96.3 tomorrow, Friday at 8 a.m. And then also the following Tuesday at 4 and Wednesday at 3. And it will also be available as a podcast on the SoundCloud at www.ncmhub.org. Click on the cloud icon in the upper right-hand corner and then scroll down. Thanks so much, everybody. See you back on Channel 9 and YouTube next Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Till then, everybody, stay strong, be safe, be well. Bye now.